A surprising move, maybe, from the Iranian regime. Reports say Iranian intelligence quietly contacted the CIA through a back channel to discuss ending the war. But, according to the same reports, Washington isn't rushing to the table. Not to mention, Iranian officials are calling the reports untrue and nothing more than propaganda. Confused? Well, we'll try to get to the bottom of this fascinating potential development. That's coming up next. We're starting off with a development that could speak volumes about the trajectory of the war. According to reporting from the New York Times, Iranian intelligence operatives quietly reached out to the Central Intelligence Agency to explore possible discussions about ending the conflict between Iran and Israel and the U.S. The message was reportedly passed indirectly through the intelligence service of a third country. Now, that's a common way adversaries communicate during wartime, when formal diplomatic channels are either frozen or politically impossible. At this stage, U.S. officials say the approach does not appear to represent a serious negotiation effort. Instead, they describe it as more of a tentative probe, an attempt to test whether Washington might be open to discussions about an off-ramp from the conflict. And for right now, at least, the answer from the White House appears to be a firm no. Iranian state media has denied the report, though, and dismissed it as psychological warfare. They're saying it never happened. But public denials like that are fairly common in situations involving intelligence back channels, particularly while a conflict is still actively underway. What makes the reported outreach notable is the timing. It comes as Iran's leadership structure is under extraordinary pressure. In recent days, Israeli and American strikes have targeted senior commanders, security officials, and elements of the regime's governing apparatus. This has all left the regime, of course, scrambling to stabilize its leadership. And in that chaotic environment, even identifying who can speak on behalf of the Iranian regime has become increasingly complicated. And that raises a broader strategic question. Military campaigns that focus on decapitating leadership can weaken an adversary's ability to coordinate a response, but they can also create a different problem, one where it becomes difficult to identify a counterpart capable of negotiating or enforcing a ceasefire. In other words, the harder the campaign hits Iran's leadership, the harder it may become to find someone who can actually deliver on any potential agreement. Even if Tehran's security establishment decided that it wanted a pause in the fighting, it is far from clear that any surviving authority could enforce that decision across Iran's complex network of power centers, which includes its regular military, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, of course, intelligence services, and various political and clerical institutions. There's also the question of what the U.S. would demand in return, should there be any sort of discussion. According to officials familiar with the talks, Washington would likely insist that any halt to the bombing campaign includes sweeping concessions from Tehran, including major limits on its ballistic missile program, significant curbs on its nuclear activities, and an end to its support for proxy groups such as Hezbollah. For now, the reported outreach appears to have changed little in Washington's immediate calculus. U.S. and Israeli operations against Iranian military infrastructure continue, and the broader trajectory of the war remains uncertain. Meanwhile, we're seeing a shift in the targets that Israel is striking inside Iran. According to reporting from the Wall Street Journal, Israeli airstrikes in recent days have increasingly focused not just on military infrastructure, but on the institutions that make up Iran's internal security apparatus, the machinery that the regime relies on to control its own population. Those strikes have hit a number of organizations responsible for suppressing protests and maintaining the Islamic Republic's grip on power. Among the targets, members of the Basij paramilitary force, senior intelligence officials, and units tied to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps that oversee internal security. One of the most notable strikes targeted the IRGC's Thurala headquarters. Now, that's a key command center responsible for coordinating protest suppression in Tehran during periods of unrest. Israeli aircraft also struck the headquarters of Iran's Police Special Units Command, known as Faraja, which handles riot control and civil unrest. Iran later confirmed that the intelligence chief of that organization was killed in the attack. The strikes have also extended into Iran's western Kurdish regions, long considered anti-regime strongholds, where police stations and detention facilities linked to the intelligence services have reportedly been hit. Taken together, The apparent goal is to weaken the regime's police state from the air, clearing space, at least in theory, for unrest on the ground. But analysts caution that strategy may face serious limits. Authoritarian systems like Iran's have proven resilient in the past, and even after the recent strikes, the regime still maintains a near monopoly on weapons across most of the country, with besieged militias continuing to patrol the streets. For now, whether airstrikes alone can create the conditions for a popular revolt, well, that remains an open question. And speaking of the Kurdish regions, a quick follow-on to a story from yesterday's PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Yesterday, we discussed the CIA reportedly working to arm Kurdish fighters located along the Iran-Iraq border in the western frontier. Now, according to early reports, hundreds of Kurdish fighters have begun an incursion into Iran from areas near the Iraqi border. We'll have further details on this development as we go along, but it's worth noting that this is a particularly complicated situation. There are several different Kurdish militias, some that are designated by the U.S. as foreign terrorist organizations. Any involvement by Kurdish forces could have also the unwelcome result of drawing Turkey into the mix. As noted yesterday, Turkey has been engaged in a decades-long conflict with particular Kurdish factions, most notably the PKK. As mentioned, this story does bear close monitoring. All right, before we go to break, I also want to update you on a story we brought you yesterday when we reported that Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the late Supreme Leader, had been selected as Iran's next leader. Now, that information came from Iran International. That's a Persian language outlet based outside of Iran that often relies on sources inside the country. They have broken a number of major stories over the years, but in a system as opaque as Iran's, and in an environment as fluid and chaotic as Iran is right now, even well-sourced reports can sometimes get ahead of themselves. The Wall Street Journal reported yesterday afternoon that Iran's clerical leadership has not yet finalized their decision. According to Iranian state news agency IRNA, a member of the Assembly of Experts said the body will meet as soon as possible to select the next supreme leader, but that further consultations are still required. That said, most major outlets, including the New York Times and Reuters and the Associated Press, still report that Mojtaba Khamenei remains the most likely successor. We'll keep watching this story and bring you any updates as they develop. Coming up next, chaos in the Strait of Hormuz as the White House considers providing naval escorts for oil tankers. Plus, the U.S. opens a new front in the war against drug traffickers with military operations in Ecuador. I'll be right back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Now, let me take just a moment to talk about something very important, and that's planning for the future. Now, no one wants to talk about dying, obviously, but the reality is creating an estate plan can provide you and your family with tremendous peace of mind. And with Trust and Will, you can create one in as little as 30 minutes to protect guardianship of children, asset distribution, and healthcare directives. Their online platform provides step-by-step guidance and offers optional one-on-one support from attorneys in your state. Okay, so maybe you think to yourself, you're not sure if you have enough assets to warrant a will or a trust. Well, the truth is everyone has something to leave behind. Trust and Will was created by legal experts and designed and tailored just for you. It's got bank-level encryption, affordability, and amazing customer support. So don't wait until it's too late. Protect your loved ones today, tomorrow, and beyond with Trust and Will, the most trusted name in online estate planning. Go to trustandwill.com/PDB and get 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/PDB to get you 20% off. Again, trustandwill.com/PDB. Welcome back to the PDB. I want to give you an update on what's unfolding in the Strait of Hormuz as Iranian threats and attacks rattle shipping in one of the world's most critical energy corridors. President Trump has announced that the U.S. will step in with naval escorts and political risk insurance for tankers sailing the strategic passageway. The Strait of Hormuz sits between Iran and the Arabian Peninsula, and as we've discussed, carries roughly 20% of global seaborne oil shipments. As you know, any sustained disruption there quickly impacts global energy markets. And that is exactly why this corridor has become another front in the conflict. The strait has long been one of Tehran's preferred pressure points, and in recent days, the regime has begun turning those threats into action. As we've previously discussed, several commercial vessels have been attacked around the waterway. One ship caught fire after being struck by an unknown projectile, and another was attacked near Oman, forcing its crew to evacuate. At the same time, Tehran has tried to project control over the corridor itself. The regime claimed the strait is closed and warned that any vessel attempting to transit would be, quote, set ablaze. Now, U.S. officials say that claim is simply not true. The waterway remains open, but traffic has thinned as some operators avoid the passage, worried about exactly the kind of attacks that we have seen unfold. And that's the environment that Trump is now responding to. The president announced in a post on Truth Social that he ordered the United States International Development Finance Corporation to provide political risk insurance and financial guarantees for maritime trade moving through the Gulf. Trump wrote that, quote, effective immediately, the program will offer political risk insurance for shipping companies in the region. He added that the Navy could even begin escorting tankers through the strait, if necessary, to ensure what he described as the, quote, free flow of energy to the world. The move is seen as a bid to cool energy prices after oil prices surged more than $10 per barrel in the days following the joint U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran. And the market reaction has been visible on the shipping side as well. Insurance companies have begun raising premiums for vessels operating in the area, and in some cases, canceling coverage altogether, prompting tanker operators to avoid the route. Inside the Trump administration, officials say the White House is closely watching the economic fallout from the military campaign against Iran. One person familiar with the discussions told Politico that access to the strait is especially critical for energy exports from Gulf producers such as allies Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Simultaneously, the widening conflict has begun hitting energy infrastructure across the region. Qatar has temporarily shut down a major natural gas export facility, and Saudi fuel refineries have come under attack. As we've been tracking, the U.S. military says it has already sunk 11 Iranian vessels since the start of joint operations with Israel. American officials believe future naval operations may focus less on ship-to-ship confrontations and more on intercepting Iranian missiles or drones aimed at civilian shipping. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the administration would roll out additional measures to address rising energy prices triggered by the conflict, but kept details limited. He also said the U.S. intends to eliminate Iran's naval threat in the region as part of the sustained effort to keep the Strait of Hormuz open. Okay, well, while it may seem that all eyes are currently focused on the Middle East, I do want to turn now to South America, where a new front in the Trump administration's counter-narcotics campaign is opening. The U.S. and Ecuador have begun joint operations, with American special forces advising Ecuadorian soldiers conducting raids on trafficking infrastructure. I want to highlight a key detail before getting into the specifics of the operations, and it's one that the Pentagon has made very clear. American troops will not be the ones carrying out these raids. U.S. forces are providing planning support, intelligence, and logistics, while Ecuadorian soldiers will carry out the operational missions. And we're already getting a glimpse of what those missions look like. A 30-second video released by the U.S. Southern Command shows a helicopter lifting off in low light and deploying fighters during what U.S. military officials say is the opening phase of the operation. The command says that the raids are part of a growing regional effort to confront what it calls the, quote, scourge of narcoterrorism. To better understand why this partnership matters, you have to look at what's been happening inside Ecuador itself. The South American country has seen a surge in violence tied to powerful drug trafficking organizations moving cocaine through its territory. Criminal networks have increasingly turned Ecuador into a key logistics hub, using its ports and coastal routes to move narcotics toward markets in the U.S. and Europe. And while Ecuador isn't a major producer of cocaine, its location makes it very valuable to traffickers. The country sits between Colombia and Peru, which are the world's two largest cocaine producers, making it an ideal transit corridor for narco-terrorist groups that move the gear north and across the Atlantic. That growing threat is exactly why Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa has leaned heavily into security cooperation with Washington. Noboa has prioritized aggressive action against drug gangs as violence tied to trafficking networks has pushed his country to record homicide levels. As our longtime PDB listeners know, the U.S. has been ramping up its own pressure campaign across the region. Since September of 2025, American forces have carried out dozens of strikes against suspected Venezuelan drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. And the coordination between the two countries has been building for months. U.S. Southern Command Chief Francis Donovan recently traveled to the Ecuadorian capital of Quito, where he met with Noboa and senior Ecuadorian officials to discuss expanding security cooperation. In a statement after the meeting, Donovan praised Ecuador's armed forces for what he described as their, quote, courage and resolve in confronting narco-terrorist networks. Shortly after the meeting, Noboa confirmed that Ecuador was entering what he called a new phase of operations targeting both drug trafficking groups and illegal mining networks. He said the March campaign would involve joint missions with regional partners, including Washington. Now, a few weeks ago, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, hosted military leaders from across the Western Hemisphere in Washington to coordinate strategies against transnational criminal organizations that are operating throughout the region. So as narcotics networks expand their reach across Latin America and the Caribbean, the U.S. again appears willing to deploy military assets alongside regional partners to disrupt traffickers and dismantle the cartels and criminal networks. Okay, coming up next in the back of the brief, new U.S. pressure against Caracas as the Trump administration reportedly prepares a criminal indictment against Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez. More on that when we come back. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take a moment of your time to talk about security, specifically your online security, and to tell you about Delete Me. Delete Me is a great company out there working to make people safer online. Now, Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. Look, it's easier than ever to find personal information about people online. You know that. But having your address, your phone number, your family members' information just hanging out on the internet, well, that can have actual consequences in the real world and can make you vulnerable to all sorts of scams. If you're like me, privacy and protecting your online presence is very important. We all want to stay protected from identity theft or harassment or doxing, and you can do that with the help of Delete Me. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for PDB listeners. You can get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/PDB and use the promo code PDB at checkout. Again, to get 20% off, go to joindeleteme.com/PDB and enter the code PDB at checkout. One more time, that's joindeleteme.com/PDB, code PDB. In today's Back of the Brief, we're heading back to Venezuela, where Washington appears to be turning up the pressure on the country's new leadership, even as the political transition there remains in flux. According to an exclusive report from Reuters, the Trump administration is weighing criminal charges against Venezuela's acting president, that, of course, would be Delcy Rodriguez, as part of a broader effort to force cooperation from the remnants of the Maduro-era power structure. Four sources familiar with the matter told Reuters that U.S. prosecutors in Miami have been investigating Rodriguez for years over alleged corruption and money laundering tied to Venezuela's state oil company, PDVSA, and are actively readying a draft criminal indictment. The probe has reportedly intensified over the past 2 months and focuses on financial transactions that took place between roughly 2021 and 2025, when Rodriguez was a senior figure in Nicolas Maduro's government. Now, as our regular listeners know, the looming possibility of an indictment comes at a delicate moment inside Venezuela. Rodriguez, of course, stepped in as Venezuela's acting president following Maduro's capture. But despite friendlier relations with the Trump administration, at least on the surface, the system that Maduro built remains largely intact, with loyalists still embedded across the military, the courts, and key government institutions. According to the sources that spoke with Reuters, the Trump administration's play here may be to use the threat of indictment as leverage to start breaking up the entrenched system still loyal to Maduro. And given that the U.S. captured Maduro and brought him to New York for trial over criminal charges of narco-terrorism and cocaine trafficking, well, the threat alone would carry serious weight. Despite President Trump's public praise of Rodriguez, the report says U.S. officials have been pressing her behind the scenes to detain or extradite several high-profile figures from the Maduro era, including businessmen and political operators accused of helping move billions of dollars through Venezuela's oil sector. The extradition of such figures would both strengthen the criminal case against Maduro and give Washington even greater leverage over the direction that the post-Maduro government takes. Now, there is a twist here. I need to stress that the Justice Department, the U.S. Justice Department, strongly denied Reuters' reporting in a public statement, saying that no such decision has been made. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche went so far as to call the Reuters report, quote, completely false, and added, quote, not sure how such fake news makes its way to publication. But Reuters quickly responded, saying their sources have been vetted and they stand by their reporting that a criminal indictment against Rodriguez is indeed being prepared. Now, if Reuters' reporting does prove accurate, it suggests Washington is trying to manage Venezuela's transition with both a carrot and a very large stick, publicly working with Rodriguez to stabilize the country, while privately holding the threat of criminal charges over her head. And that, my friends, is the President's Daily Brief for Thursday, the 5th of March. Now, if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. And also, if you haven't already, I do hope you'll check out our YouTube channel. That's obviously located on YouTube, and you just search up at President's Daily Brief. Take a look at it. If you like what you see, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button. I'm Mike Baker, and I'll be back later today with the PDB Afternoon Bulletin. Until then, stay informed, stay safe, stay cool. Hey, Mike Baker here. Let me take a moment to talk about personal finances and the importance of diversifying your assets. So here's the question. Do you own physical gold? Well, in today's world with its ups and downs and general instability, and I'd say we've got a little bit of general instability right now, owning gold is something that everyone should consider. And here's a top tip, right? Acre Gold makes it simple. That's Acre, A-C-R-E. With Acre Gold, you pick a plan that fits your budget, you make monthly payments, and when you've accumulated enough, they ship you a beautifully designed 24-karat Swiss gold bar. Gold is up 70% year over year, and central banks, well, they're still buying at record levels. The reality is, smart money has been moving into hard assets for a reason, and Acre Gold makes investing and owning gold easier than ever. And let me just say, once you hold a physical asset like gold in your hands, well, you understand the difference between owning something real and something physical as compared to investments that are just numbers on a screen. And right now, the folks at Acre Gold are giving away 2 5-gram Ancient Collection gold bars. You can enter for free for a chance to win the gold bars and also subscribe to gold at getacregold.com/PDB. Again, that's getacregold.com/PDB. Hey, thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment, a really positive, nice, and kind comment. That would be appreciated. And if you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our daily updates.